Hi everyone.
Another Saturday.
It's Saturday again. How many weeks have you been in school, Nick?
I think like four now.
Oh my God, that's wild.
Something like that. It's so weird though. I mean, just oh, hi tomato juice. Sorry. Sorry.
Wild, just
Yeah, sorry. Did you hear that? I
a
didn't
little
mean
bit,
to.
but it's okay. It added
I was
flavor to
trying.
the
I was
episode.
trying to. I was trying to do it quietly. I have to. I like V8 in the morning. It's just good. But yeah, got to get my vitamins. But but no, like what I was saying is like school's just been weird just because I have to give it to the school. They've done a good job taking care of stuff. Like there's another one of the local colleges is like shutting down completely. They're sending all their students home and stuff, and they have like three dorms that are quarantined. Not where I'm at, but like they have it all shut down and people are on their way home and they went straight online. But like for us, like there's only been a few issues and the school's actually done a really good job of keeping everybody safe and protected. And it's like, but my classes are just weird because like it's a thing where like you're used to meeting every week, but the way that it's changed up is just it's crazy because like I have this one class that's like incredibly in depth and I love it. I enjoy the lectures so much, but it's like we only meet in person once a month. Otherwise, we're, online or we're meeting in teams or we're and doing it digitally. So it's different,
Yeah, I feel bad for
with
the
that
people whose
here.
last year it is. Like, I couldn't imagine my last year. Well, I mean, I guess half my last year was like this, but like, I don't know. It must feel so disconnected. Like, how do you feel?
No,
I'm
it's
lucky because I'm deferred to spring for USC, so I'm just kind of
yeah.
filling out for fall.
No, it's pretty neat. Just I mean, well, parking doesn't suck, which is nice.
Hey, that's good.
Like no, really, parking, it's like parking for the summer semester
Wow.
almost. I'm serious. Like there's like absolutely no parking issue whatsoever. Like
Wow.
you will never, I mean, it doesn't matter what time you're coming to campus or anything. There is like a ridiculous amount of parking spots available in the parking lot, which I know that you are definitely not used to,
I'm not used to
um,
that at all.
at all. It's
I would
crazy. So
always go
it's
at
like,
good times though. Like I'd go like hours early to class because I just do work there. So like I usually didn't run into an issue, but there was definitely like it was still like a little difficult.
no, I'm talking about like when I'm leaving, you know, my truck's like the only vehicle in the parking lot. It's
Holy
like that. Yeah,
crap.
I'm talking about like when I'm showing up, I can park anywhere in front of any building I want to and anywhere in the parking garage, like prime levels, prime spots, no matter what time of day. So it's like that's pretty neat, but otherwise it's like it's doing well and it's neat because like when my class meets outside, like we go on walks or we go discover places, but it's neat having class outside when we can and stuff. So but I mean, yeah, otherwise it's just like, yeah, it's just a whole lot less people on campus and classes are a bit smaller and the ones that are bigger like have to manage, but otherwise like everything's been going well and it's not so bad really. Like I'm not complaining. It's kind of nice. Like if you're, not like I don't have class on Monday, but it's kind of nice. Like if your Tuesday class and your Wednesday class are online, because then it's like I don't even have to worry about going to campus on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I might not have to go to campus until like Thursday or something. So it's kind of neat when you come into a week like that, but then you have to be smart, because it can stack up really quick if you're not wise. So it's been interesting, but I have to say like I admire that the school is like not caving like so many around us and just going like, oh my God, three people got sick, shut it down. It's like they've really done a good job at making it so that we can actually get to campus because that's where you learn best is there in person. Like the online thing is a freaking joke. I hated every minute of that shit, and I just don't want to go back to it.
So I don't think anybody does. So needless to say, wear your masks and this will all be over faster.
Yeah, wear a mask. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, literally. Okay, great. So we're going in. I'm really excited for this episode because
I
Martin
know you've
Scorsese
been.
is my favorite director.
Yeah,
It
you've
used to
been
be
going
Tarantino,
crazy.
but like, oh my gosh, I can't.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it can be. You can.
I mean, there's so
You
many,
don't
but
have
like,
to have a many. You can. I appreciate auteurs, and
that's
Scorsese
true.
is
That's true.
very
I guess
much
one of
an
my pet
auteur.
peeves of mine is when people just like one of my pet peeves of mine is when film people are like, my favorite movie, I couldn't possibly like. I'm like, okay, we get it. You like a lot of movies. We get it. You like a lot of directors. So I try and have like a favorite for when people ask me because I know like it's a pet peeve of mine. So I'm assuming other people have the pet peeve. But yeah, Martin Scorsese is my favorite. Shout out to actually Sean Forrest, who not only taught me everything I needed to know about Scorsese in his Scorsese class, but also sent me this really nice photograph of young Scorsese.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like super. It's super cool. It's from like this museum he was at in like Amsterdam, I think. But yeah, it was super cool.
Oh, that's. You can always count on 7 foot Sean Forrest to come through
Honestly, though,
with badges of kindness.
he's perfect. I agree.
He's the nicest
Um,
person ever. I love that I know him and get to work with him and hang out with him.
Sean, if you're out there
He's
listening,
super.
join us on the podcast. Nick is
He's
trying to
super
butter
good
you up
people.
because you're on the schedule in a couple of weeks, and we have a couple
A
months. And
couple.
we
Whoa,
haven't
whoa, whoa,
asked. No, I'm
easy,
just.
easy, easy, easy.
I said weeks, and I made myself nervous. I
Whoa
was
now,
like, wait, what?
whoa now.
I
How
was like, in
about
a couple weeks. Is it in a couple
nice?
weeks?
Woo! How about
I didn't
birth
even
the
give you
litter
a
of purple kittens? Woo!
heart attack at whatever
My
time it
goodness, man. How about stood up? Here, calm
is.
down. Settle yourself.
Oh my god, I got excited. I like
I
it when she
get
was on
the.
the podcast.
I know I get the V8 in me. I don't know what to do,
You got all
man.
your vitamins and minerals, and now you can go run a
I
mile.
needed it. I about had a heart attack right there. A couple weeks. I'm just like, the fuck?
No,
What
you
are you
honestly might want
talking
to get
about?
like another V8.
I'm like, what are you talking about, dude?
I misspoke.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm gonna kick off Martin Scorsese films. He's like,
Yeah.
Who's That Knocking at
Do
My
it.
Door? So that one, and there's a couple others. There's like, Who's That Knocking at My Door? There's
Push
one
through
named
the. Yeah,
after a
the first.
specific guy, and then like, What's a Nice Girl Doing in a Place Like This? Which I think one of those three was Harvey Keitel's first role.
Yeah.
But the thing I really like about Martin Scorsese's films is he makes a lot of films, which is something I really appreciate. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
noticed that a lot of directors actually don't actually direct a ton of work, which is really surprising to me. But I like that there's a whole bunch of Martin Scorsese work, right? And so you have this kind of beginning era of Martin Scorsese where he's this like film student at NYU, and he's kind of this group of filmmakers. There's a couple others like Lucas and Brian De Palma, et cetera, and John Carpenter and stuff, who they're all it's like the film school generation. So you have like the studio system,
Well,
you have the
Coppola too.
studio system collapse, and then you have like the film school generation. And the film school generation is kind of the first look at what we consider independent film today. um and so it's
Yeah.
really interesting to see how a lot of his student work has a lot of like academic claim to it. You know, a lot of student work, including mine, like it's like very practice oriented, and yes, you get a sense of that in his, but it's really elevated, and I really like that about it. But he does remind me of Kubrick in a lot of his earlier work, where like there's this sense that he doesn't fully trust his voice yet, which makes sense. He needs more experience, but I find it funny that he kind of does the same thing Kubrick does in a lot of his earlier films, where there's like a ton of narration and there's not a lot of reliance on the visual images, when the visual images might just be enough, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're both New York filmmakers,
Yeah, they're both New York filmmakers just
and
starting.
Kubrick was doing it specifically. One that comes to mind would be Killer's Kiss.
Color Kiss, and like
You know.
Fear and Desire right
Yeah.
before that
Well,
too.
yeah, but Killer's Kiss is so New York specific. Yeah,
That's true.
Fear and
That's true.
Desire is the first, but I mean, yeah, when I'm thinking New York, it's like Killer's Kiss is the first one that comes to mind because he
Mhm.
really does the expanse of the city. But I think that you bring up a good point there because with so many of these first ones, specifically when you're at like Who's That Knocking on My Door, Boxcar Bertha, Mean Streets, you're talking about we're very New York centric, and we're very much caught in the times of the city. I mean, there's a hinge, there's a tint of reality, so much in those couple early films
Yeah.
that he even carries further into Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore when
Oh
we
yeah.
when we come into a dynamic of just the reality. It's like the nuclear family isn't a thing anymore. Now we're into a reality where a woman can be bringing up a child on her
Well,
own
and
and
yeah, that's
having
the
to
other
work for
thing.
herself, and
Uh-huh.
thinking about that time, that era, and how male dominant the workforce
Mhm.
was, and just how incredibly difficult it would be for a woman during that time to have to bring up a son on her own and go through what what's gone through in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. I mean, that's a gender critical dynamic that few were willing to put a lens to, but just as he did with his early realities of inner city New York, here we have it with a woman,
Oh yeah, and then to like
protecting
take
her
it back
protecting
a
her
little bit
cub,
further
you
too.
know.
Yeah, to take it back like it to Boxcar Bertha, because like I don't like Boxcar Bertha very much, but like it is important in terms of like Scorsese's expression, and it also really showcases this important thread where I think it's interesting. So there are so many different feminist movements, right? And I'm of the camp of feminism where like I'm a feminist in that like I think women should be able to do whatever the hell they want and not get criticized for it. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like if a woman wants to like show off her body, she should be able to do that and be empowered. If a woman wants to be completely modest, covered in head to toe with a hijab on, like she should be able to do that. Like I'm of the camp that women are very multifaceted and there are different ways to express womanhood. You should be able to express that, right? And I
Hmm.
think it's really interesting because coming from that kind of camp of like womanhood and being feminist in that way, I was very empowered by a lot of Scorsese's films, and I mean a lot of other gangster films and crime dramas specifically. But I like Scorsese a lot because I see Scorsese taking great care with his female characters and being really empowering to these female lenses. And you see it a lot in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore for sure, but you kind of see
Oh
the
yeah,
beginnings of that in Boxcar Bertha because it's
yeah,
very interesting to me how Scorsese kind of like I think in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore specifically too. We talked about this a little bit with Billy Wilder, how Billy Wilder gets a very accurate portrayal of the female experience. So while
yeah,
it's not a woman's lens, it speaks very strongly to what it's like to be a woman because there's so much collaboration with the female actor, right?
yeah.
And with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore particularly, but you see it in a lot of Scorsese's other work. Scorsese, I think, point blank said, I don't understand what it's like to be a woman, so I'm going to rely on this actress. I'm
Yeah.
completely spacing on her name right now. She's the exorcist in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. But I'm gonna rely on her perception, and I'm going to trust that and acknowledge that, and give her a section to develop this so that we can get a more accurate portrayal of what it's like to be a woman. So I think a lot of people just see the hyper violence that kind of starts off, which Boxcar Bertha, you get it, but that's kind of like Scorsese not understanding or not knowing if he's going to become an exploitation director or not.
Mhm.
And I don't remember the exact person's name, but one of his friends discouraged him from that. So then you have Mean Streets, where Mean Streets was kind of Scorsese's first critically acclaimed movie. It's like Robert De Niro, one of his big introductions and all of this stuff. But it's the introduction to hyperviolence in Mean Streets that you may not necessarily get a ton of in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, but you definitely get a ton of going forward from that.
Well, I
And
think
a lot of people just kind of like label Scorsese as this like hyper masculine macho man director when his films are so much more nuanced than that. But what were you gonna say?
we'll also remember, like in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. That's where you have,
You have a beast.
Harvey Keitel comes in, and you have him
Oh
smacking.
my God. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. You're
yeah.
right.
There, that's where I think
And you have the shitty husband. Oh my God.
you cross over into a thing where I think it's Ellen. I think it's Ellen Burstyn is who it.
I
Yeah,
think so. Let me look it up while you make your.
it's Ellen Burstyn, who plays Alice. But yeah, um, it's it's one of those things where I think, yeah, you cross over because we see the violence, like you said, in Mean Streets, and we see De Niro in a part where he's not, the guy on top. He's the
Yeah.
guy that it's coming to, um, and I think that's when Harvey Keitel was so high up in the hierarchy within Scorsese films. But then, like, yeah, within Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, we come over to the spousal abuse, the relationship abuse, which is always like, no matter what film you get through in
Yeah, and when I
Scorsese,
say,
there's a pulse to it.
yeah,
There's a narrative in it that's coming to it. But then what's crazy though is, we're introduced to Jodie Foster as well, and
mhm.
Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And
And that's her
then we
first
get
role
then
when we get in Texas.
we get into Jodie Foster goes from like this curious kid over to a hooker in Taxi Driver, when we get into the
But
mind of
really quick
this,
note, really quick before you move on to Taxi
Travis.
Driver.
Yeah.
But when I say hyperviolence, I don't necessarily like mean that like, that relationship violence and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore isn't like hyperviolent. I mean like gun shootouts in the streets, like large scale, like,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
taxi driver violence that Scorsese is known for. So yeah, that's to define my terms super quick before
Oh
we move
yeah.
on. But yeah,
No,
Taxi
no.
Driver, continue.
No, that's exactly what I was alluding to, that I think that it the relationship, what we transitioned to in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, was the transition away from that hyper violence. It's like, I think that the relationship that we develop with Alice and what she goes through, I think on a level, it's equatable to that, but it's more emotional than it is a shock and awe scenario.
Yeah, and with Taxi Driver and Raging Bull and Color of Money and Goodfellas, like you get into this era of Scorsese, even Cape Fear and Casino, where like all of these characters in Scorsese's films, right? They're all, well, actually, I just thought of another point I want to make really quick on the note of family, which I'll make in a second. But all of these films, I wish more people analyze them through the sense of like unreliable narrators slash this like bad person that you're not necessarily supposed to like. Yes, they can be likable in situations, but you're not supposed to
Yeah.
be rooting for Scorsese's characters. And I think that's part of why a lot of people like mark him as this like he's promoting male violence and blah blah blah. You're not supposed to relate to Travis Bickle. You're not
Oh no,
supposed to
no,
relate
no.
to the man in the Raging Bull. I'm completely
Yeah.
spacing on his name. You're not supposed to relate to what's
Jake
his face,
LaMotta. Yeah.
Jake LaMotta. Yeah, you're not supposed to relate to them. You're not supposed to relate to Robert De Niro or Joe Pesci in Casino,
Well, I think
or
it's a
what's his name?
testament to the storytelling is what it
Everything.
is.
Yeah,
I
that's true.
think, it's a testament to how you tell the story, because yeah, with Travis Bickle, you're sitting there and you're just like, he's taking Sybil Shepherd to a porn, and you're just kind of like, whoa, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? And then we become unhinged with him, and then all of a sudden, like, it turns around to where he becomes heroic, but we sit there just kind of like going, wait, I can't, like, this can't be right, this isn't just. So it's like, it's
Yeah,
neat because you get drawn to his characters, but then he knows, like, when their quills become sharp, and when they stand on end, when they sting you, like, he lets you get close to characters, but then stings you enough to where you have to pull away and
well,
really let the humanity of him sink in. And because, like you said, it happens with Raging Bull too, because we see somebody who's a womanizer, a misogynist, an abuser, like, in so many ways, and we're like, holy shit. And then you mentioned, Color of Money as well, which is essentially just a remake of The Hustler from '61, where Paul Newman plays the pool shark, but
yeah.
in Color of Money, it's Tom Cruise. But we see this guy trying to, like, relentlessly live through
I
a
hate
young
Color of
man.
Money.
Yeah, and
But
it's a tough film. But
no, I
then,
just don't like it. But that's okay. I
like, we
think
get
Tom Cruise deserves
into,
it.
and then, Cape Fear was a remake. But let's focus as we transition on the down here.
Yeah, but I want to make a
Let's
really
get
quick
in,
note, and I also want to add a film.
do it,
So
and
with,
then let's go to, like, the gangster film.
yeah, solid. Okay, cool. Yeah, but with Taxi Driver 2 and Raging Bull and all these like male characters who are acting out, but a lot of people I see relate to them. Like a lot of people, like a lot of people. It's interesting because um all these men aren't making decisions for the greater good. They're making decisions out of their own pride and hubris, which is very
Yeah,
interesting. Like in Taxi Driver, when he saves her at
selfish.
the end, I'm putting in quotations, He's not trying to save her. His assassination plot fails, so he
Yep.
has to
Yep.
get his violent urges out somehow. So that's the only place he knows where to go, where he can get that done. In Raging Bull, he's just trying to acclimate power. In Casino, it's two men trying to acclimate power. And it's the same thing in Goodfellas. So transitioning into the gangster stuff is very interesting to me for two reasons. So I like Scorsese's gangster stuff a, like a pinch above some of the other gangster films I've seen, because I think Scorsese does this really interesting thing with the cinematic language. So you have like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, like you said, dealing with this very like close knit family unit, this very like intimate scenario of like this mother and her son. But Scorsese, throughout all of his work, has this really interesting thing where he focuses a lot on how the children are perceiving what's going on. And it's not addressed, it's not something directly brought up. You just see it when you really pay attention to what the camera work is doing. He does it in he makes it more forefront in The Irishman, but it's interesting because in Goodfellas you have the kids watching. In Casino you have Robert De Niro and Sharon Stone's daughter watching.
Yep.
And then when you get to The Irishman, a lot of people like read how they wrote the part of his daughter as misogynist because the actress didn't have a lot of lines. But it's not that. It's a carry through from the cinematic trope that Scorsese creates of children watching these figures doing stuff and children being more aware than we think they are to what's actually going on. And I think a lot of that comes from Scorsese's background in New York, where he spent a lot of time. I think there's even like a quote from him where he says like all we saw were like priests and like wise guys and all this stuff. And so
Yeah.
being surrounded by that world of gangsterism from such an early age, it makes a lot of sense that he would give such a lens to children in his gangster movies, which is really, really fascinating about them.
No, it is, and I know like we had talked at length about like Goodfellas and
Oh yeah,
Casino and such in the past. Even Gangs of New York we had
Casino's like
mentioned
one of my favorite movies of all
on our
time.
past like gang episodes, just talking about how it just doesn't have to be mobsters.
Mm-hmm.
It can be different period specific gangs like we saw in Gangs of New York, which is a really intriguing story, but and
Yeah,
then
and I have a really quick before
other
you go on to The Departed. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep it chronological. So like, I just want to add a film super quick and just mention it for people who are interested in Scorsese. So I have a ton of videos about it, so like or episodes about it. So I won't really talk super in depth. But Scorsese always said that The Age of Innocence, which is like Michelle Pfeiffer and Daniel Day-Lewis before Gangs of New York, it's a adaptation of a novel that's kind of like Anna Karenina-esque, but it's about this kind of like love story of unrequited love. And Scorsese always said that that was his most violent movie in his perception. So you have that film if you really want. I think it's really interesting that Scorsese picks like Violence of the Heart as opposed to like Down and Dirty violence as his most violent film, but also you have a lot of religious films of Scorsese's that we're not going to get to in this episode because his gangster films kind of take the forefront. But I just wanted to mention them. So go ahead and Nick and take us into the rest of
No,
them.
it's the like it's once again it's the exact same dynamic between Mean Streets and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. The ultra violence of the heart
Yeah.
is so much more profound than the ultra violence of what's physical, what's in front of the eye. It's the emotion that's more piercing, and so that's just once again he does it again, and I think that's why he mentions that that's his most violent film,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just what it is. That's how emotion gets to people. But
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead and take us
I
out.
think, but it definitely another piece is that in a lot of this, like no one wins. It's
Mm-hmm.
very rare that you have a Scorsese film, and there's one that I will always think that somebody wins, that I can find in all of his stuff, and I know there's others, but uh, like in The Departed, I mean, it's just such a tale. It takes us through such a story, and through just it's such classic Scorsese. But then in the end, it's just kind of like nobody wins, everybody dies, and it's just like it's going to continue on. But then there's another story that it happens and then it just crushes me, and that's in Shutter Island. I thought Shutter Island is just one of his just such an incredible film, and
I have a
the
difficult time
story it
with Shutter
takes
Island.
you it's such a good um film, and it takes you in so many directions, but it's just so heart-wrenching and so it hurts you so bad at the end, and you're just kind of like, and the story that it weaves you through. But I love it when something can do that. But then on the other end of that, you know, is you have like the one film that I absolutely love of his called Hugo,
Yes,
um,
it's so
that
good.
weaves you through such a fun story and makes you just feel like a kid.
Mhm.
And I just love the tale that it tells. I love its meta effect as well. I love its connection, the way it weaves itself into Hollywood history, and it
Yeah.
makes it super fun. You know, the only
Actually, I
others.
appreciate that
Yeah,
you brought that up because it's very similar to Billy Wilder having a really strong understanding of Hollywood.
yeah,
You
yeah.
see Scorsese's super strong understanding in Hugo, so that's a really good point.
I like that. I like how it's related though, you know. I like how we're woven into like the early turn of the century films, like early 20th century, you know, and how it weaves into like George Méliès and the Lumieres and stuff. And it's really interesting the little connection that he makes in like this really fun childish film. It's a blast, you know, and I always enjoy it. It's one I like to go, and it's one where it's happy at the end, you know, everybody comes out on top, everybody wins, which is a rarity. And then, you know, it went on, and you know, he just, you know, recently, like, I had seen Wolf of Wall Street. I thought it was put together really well. I thought, you know, DiCaprio does good in
In
pretty
everything
much
they,
any
I his
Tarantino
accent though
and
in Gangs
any
of New York,
Scorsese.
no bueno.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough, but I mean, otherwise, anytime um, Leonardo DiCaprio gets put in a
Mhm.
Scorsese or a Tarantino film, he does
Kills it,
exceptionally well,
crushes
you
it.
know. But I mean, Scorsese still showed us, proved once again just why he's the auteur with The Irishman, where once again, you know, like relating it to real life, like he did with Goodfellas with Henry Hill, you know, like he made Casino so fun and believable,
Mhm.
you know, how Departed was so believable, Shutter Island just took us to a rock bottom, Hugo took us to a super high,
Mhm.
Wolf of Wall Street had some truth to it, but then with The Irishman, you know, we get this really great angle of the story of Jimmy Hoffa. And it came out at a really good time, you know, because it's coming out about the time that, you know, we have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming out as well, giving us a new angle on the Sharon Tate story, an ultra violent retribution. But now with The Irishman, you know, we get to see like the ultimate teamster, the ultimate guy who keeps his mouth shut his whole life, and it's just so interesting. The
Yeah, and
story,
so really quick to like track back a little bit, Nick, 'cause you had some super good thoughts. But the Wolf of Wall Street is interesting because it's another one where I'm like, guys, men out there, you're not supposed to identify with him. He's an
yeah,
he's an
yes,
asshole. Like, and also
yes,
it's interesting
yes,
how like Scorsese's retribution for all these horrible characters is this
yeah.
kind of life of mediocrity. So it's really
Mhm.
interesting to me how like Scorsese always has this build up where like there's this lavish life, all of these like riches, all of this luxury, X, Y, and Z, that kind of getting out of control because of this hubris a lot of the men have, and then them losing it in favor of like a mediocre, boring life. That's always super interesting to me.
Yeah.
But The Irishman is just one of my favorite films of all time. It's based off of a book I called like I Hear You Paint Houses. And I think it's technically fictionalized. Like it's one of the many theories of what happened to Jimmy
Yeah,
Hoffa. I don't
yeah,
think
yeah.
anyone
It
technically
is.
knows. But like as a huge Scorsese fan of like all of his stuff from like beginning at all of it, like the religious stuff, the exploitative stuff, everything. Like it was so fun to watch The Irishman. It's one of my favorite memories ever. It was like my first birthday alone, and like I went to The Irishman. I had like a glass of wine like during like the little like theater release they did, and it just seeing all Scorsese be able to bring everyone back together of from all of his older films, like it was just such an excellent film overall. I highly recommend actually if you like The Irishman on Netflix, they have a really interesting like round table talk with all
Oh
Scorsese,
yeah.
like
Yep.
Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and everybody, and they kind of talk about the filmmaking process, and it's really really interesting if you liked it.
No, it is, and I think it's just it was so impressive,
Mm.
just to see this film come forward. You know, I mean, I don't know, like when I think about it musically, like if I were to compare it to something in musical terms, it's like every time that Tool comes out with a new album, You know, it's just like it's
Yeah.
so far between, but like every time they do, it's just such a masterpiece
Oh
that
yeah.
you're just completely blown away, like where they've gone as an artist. And you know, you alluded to it. He brought back so many incredible talents from films of his past, you know, regular characters, regular namesakes in all of his films. And they came and just blew it out of the water. And but then he did it with his score, with his
Yeah.
cinematography, with the editing. It was just all just such a triumph. And it's so reassuring, you know, when you look at something like we start this conversation in 1967,
Yeah.
and here we are talking about a film now just gobbing over something that came out in 2019. So it's easily to see that through this opus of this auteur, you know, why we hold him and why all should hold him and should see these films and understand just why Martin Scorsese is such an incredible director
Oh
and
yeah.
such an impeccable and important part of Hollywood history in general, and who will forever be synonymous with film study wherever you go. And if you're somewhere that doesn't bother to look into study Scorsese, then you're in the wrong place. You
Well,
need to,
yeah, and it's
you know,
interesting because like to take us out, like
yeah,
Scorsese always says like it's my favorite quote of all time, but he always says like films aren't films to me, they're my life.
yep,
And it's interesting thinking about it and reflecting on all of his work because all of his work kind of tells the story of his life in like a weird way. And that's something that's really beautiful about his films. Like all of his films are so tied to who he is that it's really interesting to watch them all together.
absolutely, absolutely.
But yeah, so I think that takes us out on
Yes,
Martin
that's it.
Scorsese. Marty, but maybe we'll come back with an episode on his religious movies or something, or maybe we'll talk about
Yeah,
silence. No, I'm
who
just kidding.
knows? You
No.
could do that during the week.
Oh yeah, okay, I'll do that during the week. Nick doesn't
Yeah.
want to talk about Last Temptation of Christ. No, I'm just
Oh
kidding.
no, no, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, Nick, go watch Last Temptation of Christ for next week.
No, I don't want to watch that again. I've already watched it. I don't. Good.
Really? I love it. But anyway,
No, it's
okay.
good. I do. I do. I like it, but it's like one of those once a year movies for me.
That's fair. Well, Shutter Island, I remember back in the day, Shutter Island was my favorite movie of all time. I loved it
It's
so
so good.
much.
It's just so
And it
sad.
broke my heart when I
Yeah.
saw Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh,
And like, I can't watch Shutter Island the same.
yeah, I know. I hear you.
But
But yeah, like
that's a
Shutter
me
Island
issue.
just
It's not a Shutter Island issue.
yeah,
Shutter Island is an
I know.
excellent film.
Yeah, you have Caligari syndrome,
I
so
do have Caligari
you should look
syndrome.
into it. It's COVID 20.
Oh god. Oh god. Okay, everybody. But thank you
See,
all for joining us.
yeah, we'll see you next week. We'll
We'll see you
talk a
next
little Locust.
Oh yeah, we're gonna be doing a deep dive into one film next week. So
Yeah, we're gonna talk some Locust next week. We'll have a fun little episode, talk about Locust a little bit.
gotta do it. Yeah. Okay. Well, bye.
Have a good one.